Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. Today is Monday and I'm back for another Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. Today is again going to be another live Q&A where we're focused on helping people like yourself who have questions about how to start or grow a successful freight broker or freight agency business. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dennis Brown. Been very blessed. Started my first business back in the early 90s. Was very fortunate. Went on to grow 4 different companies to 7 figures plus in 4 different industries. Started my freight brokerage back in 2003, was very blessed, grew that to about $80 million a year in sales, and then sold that company. But along the way, I started a program called Freight Broker Bootcamp, which is the most cost-effective and comprehensive online freight broker and freight agent training program. So if you guys are curious about that, if you're looking for a course or some direction or some A to Z, rather than jumping all over the place to try to get, regurgitated information, check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Thank you for being here. If you're catching this on replay, hit me up in the comments with a hashtag replay. Love to hear from my replay folks. Thank you so much. And again, today we're going to be here for live Q&A, but here's the agenda. Really simple, guys. I'm going to keep this simple. When you come into the stream, hit me up in the comments with your name and the city and state you're viewing from or where you're at, and I'll try to do some quick shout outs, and then we're going to jump into live Q&A. So if you have questions about freight broker sales or freight broker operations or finding carriers or rating or getting your carrier or getting your motor or getting your broker authority or anything in between, okay? Anything in there in between, hiring people, the agent business model, all of it, right? Anything in between, feel free. That's why I'm here. We're going to be doing this Q&A. I'm not sure how long. I'm probably going to do around a half an hour, okay? So hold your questions until I say go, because otherwise they're going to get lost in the stream. I'm streaming this on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So a lot of times the comments for me come a lot more fast and furious. And here we go. We've got Joseph from Joe Mack from Jersey City. I'm going to throw my glasses on here because the fonts are small and I'm getting old. And we got Corey Buchan from Billings, Montana, as always. We got Phoenix from Paris, France. Phoenix is back again from Paris. Welcome, Phoenix. Thank you. So we got a bunch of people coming into the stream. We'll see how many people are here today live. And again, another minute or two, and we're going to get this show on the road. Again, we are just focusing on live Q&A today. So if you have specific questions that have been on your mind or holding you back, or that you're unsure of, or you don't believe, or you do believe, but you want to reconfirm, that's what this is for, okay? So Aries, good afternoon, welcome. Where are you from? We'll do some quick shout outs, and then we'll get this show on the road. Yes, I need a little caffeine today. I have been up way later at night than I normally am. I've fallen deep into a couple of television series, one being Homeland, which I don't know if you guys saw that, with Claire Danes. Awesome show called Homeland. It's not around anymore. It's off the air, but it had like 8 seasons. So I've been binging that like crazy, like a nut job. And then also I've been watching the new Knights of the Seven Kingdom about Sir Duncan McTall. I don't know if anybody else is a fan, but I'm usually up on the weekends until 1 or 2 or maybe 3 binging some of this stuff, which is kind of crazy because normally, I'm in bed passed out between 11 and 12. So Cynthia from Maryland, welcome, as always. All right, so we got quite a few people here live today. I'm sure a lot more people are going to catch this on replay. So if there's no more shout outs, let's just jump in. Whoever has questions, I'm going to get you in and out of here as quickly as I can, right, as far as the questions you have. So now the ball is in your court. Who has questions about freight broker startup or freight broker sales or rating or AI or anything in between, because I know we get a lot of questions these days about AI and the business marketplace, and particularly as it relates to freight brokerage, you hear a lot of hype. So hit me up in the comments with any questions you guys have, and we'll see where we can get today. The ball's in your court, okay? So if you guys don't have any questions, then we can just chat for 5 minutes. We can talk about Homeland. We can talk about Knights of the Seven Kingdoms. You know, we can talk about whatever you want, but I'm going to be out of here pretty quick. So looking for engagement for you guys with questions. I know I've been doing these almost weekly. So sometimes when I do these quite often, you guys don't have as many questions. Again, I've debated on making this a monthly event. But I feel like a month is a really long time for you to wait to get an answer. So, you know, I like to come in more often. I usually do it weekly, unless something's going on. Last Monday, I didn't do it, but that's because my furnace in my house crashed and burned, and I had to have the furnace replaced that day on Monday. So they were in and out of the house. It was going to be crazy. I had to be available. So, but yeah, that did, eventually we did get that thing replaced. But yeah, that was kind of a nightmare, especially with the temperatures we've had around here, which have been, you know, pretty consistently below 10, sometimes even below 0. So, okay. So here's a basic question from Aries 3940. How can I get into freight brokerage? All right. Well, it's a really broad question, but let me try to narrow it down for you. If you have an interest in freight brokerage, the best place to start is somewhere like this, where you can get free information. Or, for example, maybe a YouTube channel where you can get a lot more free information. Let me give you my YouTube channel. I'll put it up on the thing. I've got over 300 free training videos, if I can find it. It should be here. Okay. So if you go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/YouTube, it will redirect you to my YouTube channel. And I've got over 300 free freight broker and freight agent training videos there. So it's a great place to start. You can search specific to the topic you're looking for, but ultimately that's a great place to start. Now, to give you a little bit more direction, there's 2 avenues that you can pursue. Well, there's 3 avenues you can pursue when you're getting into brokerage. You can become an employee or a W-2 employee for a freight brokerage, which is always an option. You can go work for them as a job. A lot of people start that way. You know, that would be more like a 9 to 5. You're getting a weekly or biweekly paycheck. You know, your income is going to fluctuate depending upon your role, but it's probably somewhere in the $35,000 to $70,000 range, depending upon the company, the experience in your role. Okay. The other way you can do it is you can start your own freight brokerage. You can become a licensed freight broker through the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, through the DOT. It's a pretty simple process, but you can become a licensed freight broker. There's no test, there's no exam, there's none of that. You don't have to have a college degree. You know, you have to be 18 years or older, and you can get your freight broker license. All right. But that's the easy part. What you'd have to do from there is you'd have to get trained on how to actually start and grow a successful freight brokerage. That's the reason why I do this Freight Broker Bootcamp live Q&A on a regular basis, is because, you know, I've had my Freight Broker Bootcamp startup online course since back in 2009. It's well known to be the most cost-effective and comprehensive online freight broker, freight agent training program. And the thing about that is that program is designed to take you from not knowing what freight brokerage is to helping you get launched and start making a little bit of money with your first few customers, right? So it gets you off the ground. But it takes a lot of the mystery out of the, you know, what exactly does a freight broker do, and how do I get set up, and who are my customers, and how do I make money, and all those basics, right? So if you guys are curious about that, if you're curious about becoming a freight broker, and you've already looked at my YouTube channel and you're really looking for more of an A to Z system that's going to walk you through exactly how to become a freight broker, freight agent, and grow a successful business, you can go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com. We offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee. Now, one more comment before I move on. If you don't want to become a licensed freight broker, right? Maybe you don't have the financial resources. Maybe you don't have the credit required, which, you need to have at least average credit or better. Maybe you have bad credit, for example. Maybe you had a bankruptcy in your past, or whatever the case may be. It happens to everybody. At that point, you can become a freight agent. Now, a freight agent is a 1099 independent contractor. So you're basically your own business owner. You're not a W-2. They can't tell you what to do. They can't tell you when to report to work. They can't tell you how to do your job. You are an independent contractor, a 1099 freight agent, and you would get paid a very high commission, typically between 50 and 70% of the profit on any loads that you originate from your shippers. So that means you would do the role of a broker, but you wouldn't have to get bonded. You wouldn't have to get your surety bond. You wouldn't have to get your license. You don't have to worry about the tech. You don't have to worry about insurance. You don't have to worry about any of that. You just become a freight agent. And then what happens is you piggyback off of that broker's license, their credential, their infrastructure, and you share revenue with the broker based upon your success and their success. So that's a couple of different ways you can get into the freight brokerage industry. Hope that helps. If you got a follow-up, let me know. All right. So in the meantime, we got a bunch of questions. That's good. What do you think about signing up with TQL and Coyote to start? If you're going to become a broker, then signing up with TQL and Coyote is a waste of time. I mean, I'm not sure. You're a broker. They're brokers. Co-brokering is not a way, or double brokering is not a way to grow your business successfully. So please clarify your question. Now, if you're a carrier, right? If you're a carrier, a motor carrier, an owner-operator, signing up with TQL or Coyote or one of the bigger logistics companies probably makes sense. But if you're looking to become a broker, then I don't really think that makes sense unless you're looking for a job. If you want to get a W-2 job working as a broker in kind of a call center type format, right? Where you work and report 9 to 5, and, they tell you when you can go to the bathroom, and they tell you when to show up for work, and, they probably underpay you quite a bit. Then yeah, you can do that. Absolutely. There's tons of brokerages out there which are probably hiring in some capacity. Depends upon your experience, depends upon what your financial requirements are. But yeah, you can do that. Hope that helps. Do you recommend any company for contingent cargo insurance? To be honest with you, I don't, because startup brokers typically don't need it. The only reason you would need contingent cargo as a startup is if you had a big client that required it, okay? But the fact is that most startup brokers focus on small to medium-sized companies, and most of them don't require contingent cargo. Now, I'm not saying all of them, but most of them don't. When you run into contingent cargo a lot more is when you start swimming upstream into big enterprise-type companies. They're all going to require it, okay? So US Steel and Nestle Water and Nucor and all the big companies out there, the Fortune 1000 companies, the ones that are doing $1 billion or more in sales, they're all going to require it. But that's not where most freight brokers have their success. Most freight brokers make the most money and do the best as a small business in the spot market, which is typically focused more heavily in small to medium-sized shippers. And most of them don't require contingent cargo. So short answer, I don't have a specific company that I recommend. There are a bunch of companies out there. If you search Google for contingent cargo, maybe go on LinkedIn and ask for a recommendation from some of the brokers that are out there, because I know some of the companies have changed hands and consolidated, come into the business, went out of the business, whatever the case may be. So my suggestion to you is go to LinkedIn or go to maybe a Facebook group where there's existing brokers and ask the question there. If you're a part of my Freight Broker Bootcamp program, you can go into my paid members only program or into my paid members only Freight Broker Bootcamp Facebook group. Man, that took a lot to get out. And you can ask the question of all the students that have already went on and gotten it. But there's a lot of companies out there for contingent cargo. I just don't have one that I recommend. I probably should, but I just don't have one right now. Have you ever used Trucking Planet? If so, what do you think? Cynthia, I'm aware of Trucking Planet. I haven't used them. We didn't use them as a brokerage. I know some people do. I know they offer some different resources as far as like maybe, I think they might have a load board. I think they might have like a carrier list. They might have a shipper list. I'm not sure specifically what you're asking for in regards to using them for what. Can you be more specific? Using Trucking Planet for what? Can you come back and be a little bit more specific for what specific thing are they offering that you're looking at? And I'll try to help. Eric asks, we're starting a new brokerage. I've been working on LinkedIn on the no cold call approach. What do you recommend is the best method to land a couple of first clients? Okay, Eric, I don't know your background. Okay. I don't know your experience. I don't know your niche. I don't know any of that, but I'm going to give you kind of a little bit of a framework. Okay. I like that you're on LinkedIn, and I like that you're kind of focused on trying to be a little bit different. Okay. Here's the fact. I'm going to be very upfront with you. It is going to be very hard for you as a new broker to get clients exclusively using LinkedIn as a true startup. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's going to be slow because you probably don't have a following, right? You don't have a lot of connections because you haven't been in the industry. You may or may not be posting content. I'm not quite sure, right? Or how good you are at that. You don't really have a brand or a reputation. You probably don't have a network you can get a lot of referrals from, okay? So what I'm going to tell you is this. LinkedIn is a great tool. But before you focus in on LinkedIn, what I would like to see you focus in on is niching down. What I mean by that is this. Jack of all trades, master of none is not the way to build a highly successful freight brokerage, particularly when you're starting up. It's okay to diversify into other markets later, but as a startup, if you're really trying to get some clients quickly in your first 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, in that first month or two, you start trying to get some cash flow. My suggestion is for you to niche down, right? Niche down into a specific industry, a specific type of equipment, a specific geography, or some hybrid of those, right? Like when I first started back in 2003, we focused on Northeast outbound van loads. So if it picked up in New York or PA or New Jersey up through New England, and it was going west or south on a van, that was our niche. We focused on that niche intensely. We became experts in that niche when it came to capacity and rating and all the challenges associated with working in the Northeast. And we grew that business very rapidly. Eventually, we decided to expand into refrigerated freight out of the Northeast. And then we expanded into flatbed freight out of the Northeast. And then we expanded into other geographies. And then we expanded into other niches and other types of equipment over time. But the point was we started by niching down. Right? It's very hard to serve everybody. It's very hard to get any sort of synergy or to have any dynamics when 1 minute you're calling, working on a load from Regina, Saskatchewan to the port of Houston, and the next minute you're moving a van load from New Jersey to Harrisburg, PA. Right? So it's, there's no synergy there. So if you develop that niche, it allows you to really get under the hood and become more of an expert in that niche much quicker. It's hard to be an expert in everything, okay? So that would be your first step. The second thing is you obviously got to identify a list of potential prospects, right? So that's where you would use something like a lead source, like maybe like an Apollo. I'm going to give you guys a link here really quick. If you go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/free leads and you're looking to build a lead list, you can go there, sign up for free, okay, with no credit card. All you need is an email. And what you can do is you can search their database based upon industry, based upon geography, based upon company size, based upon job titles. You can do all that, okay? And it's absolutely free. Now, their play is simple. They give you a lot of free data. They give you a lot of free. And then what they want to do is if you want enhanced data or you want additional services, then they upsell you on those, and those are optional services. But you can sign up without a credit card through that link. Just go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/free leads. Okay. That we have a partnership with them, right? We've had so much amazing feedback from our students and from our community. we promote them because they have really good data. And if you're trying to find your niche and your target market and build a list of 100 or 500 or 1,000 prospects, that's where you need to go. Okay, there are lots of sources out there, but we like Apollo. Okay, so getting back to your question, the next step, obviously, you're gonna identify your niche. You're gonna build a list, and at that point, you got to start doing some outreach. Now, there's four primary ways I suggest you get outreach. Outreach can be by the phone, right? Which a lot of people are scared of because it's cold calling and they're going to get rejected. You can do outreach via email, which can work. But again, a lot of companies filter outside emails if they don't know who they are. So it's hard to get those emails through the firewall. Number 3 is LinkedIn, which is a great place, right? The hard part there is if you just use that as a cold calling tool, then you're going to get really lambasted because social selling is not designed for cold calling. So LinkedIn is not another form of cold calling. It's more of a warm market where you develop relationships and then you leverage those relationships to start conversations. And then the other way is through face-to-face. If your niche is in your backyard in your local geography, obviously face-to-face is hard to replace if you're willing to knock on some doors, get some rejection, and talk to people face-to-face, right? So that's the next step. But I mean, as far as really getting down into the nitty-gritty, if you want to get customers quick and you want prospects to talk to you, the number one thing you have to do is you have to be a little bit different. You can't sound like everybody else. You can't have the same scripts. You can't say the same words because they've been conditioned to give you a negative response. They've been conditioned to tell you no because they've heard all those before. So if you figure out a way to be a little bit different, you're going to have a lot of different conversations. And then from there, what I would strongly suggest is focus on solving one of their most difficult problems, right? Every shipper has lanes and product and different scenarios that are a pain in their neck, right? So if they've got this much freight, right? It's the 80-20 rule, right? There's 20% of it that creates all the problems for them, right? It's 20% of their freight creates 80% of their problems. So you want to find that 20%. And then you want to focus in on that and try to tell them, listen, I'm not here to try to steal business from anybody. I'm not here to try to take food off anybody's plate. Here's my proposal to you. Give me the hardest stuff that you have. Give me the stuff that nobody else wants. Give me the stuff that's the most challenging and the biggest headaches for you. And I will work tirelessly for you to try to solve those problems. I can't promise you anything, but you won't find anybody that'll work on it harder and be more transparent with you on what I find and the success that we're going to have for you. So that's an example of how you can kind of cut through the noise and really get to the pain of why somebody that's brand new, a prospect that you don't have a lot of relationship with, they don't have a lot of trust. Because here's the thing, man. The biggest challenge that most brokers have is not price. It's trust. Because the fear of switching to a new provider is greater than sticking with the devil they know, right? It's that the devil I know versus the devil I don't, right? They may not be 100% happy with their current provider. Okay, that's the reality. They may not be 100% happy, but they also don't know what's going to happen if they switch providers or they onboard a new vendor like yourself. So you've got to overcome that trust. And that's not an easy process to do in one call. So I hope I gave you a little bit of a breakdown. I hope that works for you. I hope if you have a follow-up, let me know. But I think hopefully you can take a few of those things and run with it. Okay, question from Phoenix. Dennis, I'm defining my niche now. Already chose my freight type, and now I'm working on lanes without access to load boards or carriers yet. What's the best way to learn my lanes before I start? That's a good question. So you don't necessarily have to have exact lanes if you don't have access to a load board, but you're going to need a load board pretty quick, okay? In order to really dive in and understand the supply and demand of trucks in and out of any market, okay, you're going to probably need a load board of some sort. Only one, a basic load board subscription like Truck Stop or the DAT or one of them, right? Or other, where you can go in and you can look at the load to truck ratio, and you can look at some of the rates that are going on, and you can look at the different types of equipment. You can look at the lanes, and you can look at the regions, and you can kind of start looking a little closer. So for the example with us, we looked at a bunch of different types of freight before we started our niche. And we identified the Northeast. And the reason why we focused on the Northeast was this, not because it had the highest rates, not because, it was the best weather conditions, right? We ultimately, what we ended up doing at that time, back in 2003, early 2004, was we chose the Northeast because we knew that if we had a shipper out of the Northeast and we could get freight at just a reasonable rate, not the cheapest, not the most expensive, there was always going to be capacity there to move that freight west or south. Now, the reason why I say that is because the Northeast is more of a consumption region than a production region. There's more freight coming into the Northeast, so there's more trucks going into the Northeast than there is product coming out of the Northeast. I don't know if you realize that. There are different places like that, right? Florida is another example of that. Places like Denver, there's remote places like that. The Northeast has a very high population, so they consume a lot, but we don't produce a lot, right? We have production, we have manufacturing, but there's an offset of a ratio of trucks in versus loads out, right? So that's how we identified it. The load boards were really, really helpful with that because we could see there was way more trucks than there was loads. Now that made the rates low. Let me give you an example. We used to move freight from Boston to Chicago on a van, a full truckload freight, for $1 or less a mile. Sometimes we'd only have to pay 95 cents a mile. Now this is over 20 years ago, but even then that was cheap. But the reason being, it was a backhaul lane because they wanted to get to Chicago, because out of the Chicago, when they turned back to the Northeast, they were going to make $2 or $3 a mile back then, which was a lot of money. So they dollar cost averaged it out. So that's how we figured that out. So I think, Phoenix, you're going to have to get access to a load board. If you are already a broker or you're already an agent, right? Then you got to get signed up for a load board. If not, then try to work with somebody, befriend somebody, try to get access to load boards. I mean, it's not an absolute must, but once you get started, you're going to get access to that, and you're going to be able to figure out your niche within pretty short order, within probably a week of just diving into that data, diving into the load board data and looking at it and reaffirming what you already suspect. But there's no way for you to get really good lane data unless you're willing to pay for it, right? And that usually comes in the form of a load board or some other subscription service. So I hope that helps. If you got a follow-up, let me know. Dave from Las Vegas, welcome. Dave says, having to get 8 prospects to onboard as a freight agent for a company, what is the best way to do this? Okay, let me read that again. Having to get 8 prospects to onboard as a freight agent for a company, what is the best way to do this? So are you asking me what's the best way to onboard shippers as a freight agent? I mean, I'm not quite sure. If you are an agent working for a brokerage, then they should already have an onboarding process. If they don't have an onboarding process, then that's something you might want to question, okay? So as a broker, whether you're operating with an agent business model or you're operating with, an inside call center type model, an onboarding process is relatively simple, right? It involves some sort of a credit app. It may involve a freight broker shipper agreement. It's probably going to involve you giving them your W-9, right? You're going to have to discuss and agree on accessorials. There's some basic onboarding stuff that you're going to need to do with a shipper, dot some I's, cross some T's up front. And then from there, you're going to get them set up in your system, right? You're going to run credit on them. If you're financing everything, then you're going to run credit yourself. If you're working with a factoring company, then they're going to run credit on them and assess risk. And then from there, once you have that set up, then the most important thing is setting the proper expectations with that shipper, making sure that you've agreed to payment terms. What are the terms? They're going to pay in 30 days. Great. Okay. What specific information do you need on billing to make sure that everything gets paid without any problems, right? Do you have any special billing requirements? Do you require this or that or the other, right? So maybe they require a specific load number or a pickup number or a reference number or whatever, a PO number. Maybe they require some specific documentation, right? So you want to understand that up front. So, from there, it really just comes down to walking before you run, right? Use the first load as a test, as a trial, not a test, but as a trial, and show them and prove to them that you have the ability to do what you say you're going to do on time and deliver that freight with no issues in good condition. So if you got a follow-up, Dave, let me know. But if you're an agent and you don't have an onboarding process already that has been handed down by the brokerage, I'd be a little bit concerned. Hit me with a follow-up if I missed the mark completely, which I may have. All right, let's see. All right, I'm scrolling. Give me a minute. All right, JM from UFS in RVA. Okay. Is there a good rule of thumb for margin when working up brokerage pricing versus carrier pricing? Signed clients as carrier side and now asking us to present broker side for review. Okay. So you've gotten clients on the carrier side and now they're asking for brokerage options because maybe there's loads that you don't want to put on your trucks that you're willing to broker out and they're willing to let you broker out. And so you're looking for the difference between what you're quoting as a carrier and what you're quoting as a broker. Well, that really is up to you, but here's the thing. You have to explain to them and have them understand that just because you are operating as a carrier with these rates doesn't mean that brokerage is going to be cheaper. Because here's the reality, right? You have contract rates versus spot market rates, and every market is different. Sometimes spot market can be higher than contract rates, and sometimes contract rates can be higher than spot market. So what you're going to want to do is make sure, number one, that if you don't want to cannibalize your carrier side, right, and the load you're getting as a carrier, you're going to want to make sure that you address that up front and let them know that there are going to be lanes in the brokerage side which may appear cheaper per mile than the carrier side. But I wouldn't directly compete on your carrier business in order to keep those wheels turning and pay those bills. You don't want to compete on those lanes. What you want to do is you want to focus in on lanes that you're not servicing as a carrier. So in most cases, trying to bring this full circle here, in most cases, brokerage margin ranges from 10 to 20% of the load value. So if it's $1,000 load, just for easy math, a broker will make $100 to $200 margin. That's gross profit that they'll put in their pocket. Okay. So with an average of probably in the 15 to 17% range, depending upon market conditions. So if trucks are very tight, right, that margin may go up. If trucks are very loose, right, that margin may go down. The specific market conditions, the specific lane, the specific type of equipment that you're dealing with will warrant that, right? So the general rule is 10 to 20% profit margin. Again, that's $100 to $200 for every $1,000 load value. So if you quote them 1,000, you're probably going to be putting $100 to $200 in there. If you're really just trying to get started with them on the brokerage side, my strong suggestion is probably focus on the lower end, the 10 to 15% margins to get started. You can always raise those rates later as you build additional trust. If you have a follow-up, let me know. I hope that helps. Yeah, Staff Bowl. I meant co-brokering with TQL or Coyote to start to avoid licensing and high startup costs. I would need to find shippers, quote lanes, and pass on TQL, basically dipping toe in. Okay, you can't become an agent for TQL or Coyote. They don't have an agent business model. Okay, and if you want to co-broker with them, you'd have to have your own brokerage authority. So you can't do that either. Okay, so if you want to broker loads, you need to be one of two things. You need to be a licensed broker through the FMCSA, and you have your freight broker authority, or you have to be an agent that operates under them, under their license. So if you worked for TQL, they don't have an agent model. They only have a W-2 employee model, right? You'd have to find a brokerage. There are tons of brokerages out there that will hire agents based upon their criteria. Some require experience, some require a book of business, many don't. But ultimately, if you want to start as a freight agent, then no, you don't need a license, you don't need a bond, you don't need insurance, you don't need any of that. But you're not going to go to TQL, you're not going to go to Coyote. You're going to focus on small to medium-sized brokerages. Maybe a brokerage is doing $1 million to $10 million in sales. Maybe they've been in business 1, 2, 3, 5 years. The reason why you want to focus on them and not the big brands is because the smaller brands need you more. The smaller brokerages need you more. They don't want to go out and pay somebody $60,000 or $80,000 base to come in and help build their brokerage. But they will hire somebody on straight commission based on 50 to 70% profit, because the reality is their risk is next to nothing and their cost is zero unless you produce revenue. So I hope that makes sense. Alan, does your course teach how to get started from the ground up? 100%. Here's what I'll explain. Freight Broker Bootcamp was designed specifically with brand new people in the industry. The reason why I put it together was because when I first started back in 2003, there really wasn't a lot of good information online. There wasn't a lot of online courses, right? There wasn't coaches that were teaching this stuff. I was trying to pull from here and there and here and there and everywhere. And eventually what I did is I got so frustrated, I ended up hiring a consultant who'd been in the industry for 20, 30 years, flew him to Buffalo and paid him about $10,000 to spend a week with me, okay? Now, during that time, I had already had kind of my basic understanding of what was going on and what our plan was, and I wanted him to poke holes on it and fill the gaps. So that's what we did. But I realized that most people, most people don't have that type of money to try to pay a consultant to come in and do that. So when I put Freight Broker Bootcamp together, I put that program together with all of the information that I was looking for when I was first trying to get started, but couldn't get access to, or they were from sources I didn't trust. And so, yes, it starts from not knowing anything about the freight brokerage industry to having a foundation understanding to becoming a freight broker or a freight agent and getting your first shippers and starting to make money. That is the focal point, to take you from zero to getting your first few shippers and generating cash flow. From there, it's wash, rinse, and repeat, okay? So it is truly a startup program. It's designed specifically for startup. So if any of you are curious about that and you're just looking for more information about what that entails and how it works, it's a self-paced, go at your own pace online course. You can go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com. You can check it out. It'll give you all the details. It gives you all the success stories and the testimonials. It gives you everything that's a part of the program. And it comes with a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee. Okay? So hope that helps. Okay, so we're going on 40 minutes. So let me see how many, and we still got a ton of questions here. I'm going to try to entertain a few more questions. Let me see if I can scroll down and what I can find that hasn't been answered already. Okay, Avery asks, do you need a broker shipper packet to start making calls to shippers and move your first load? It would be smart to have a broker shipper packet, but it doesn't have to be this extensive, crazy thing. It can here's what the minimum thing that you would need in a broker shipper packet. You would need a credit application that agrees to that they must sign and agree to 30-day credit terms, and it states that you are a freight broker, not a carrier. Okay? So that becomes your basic contract that you're operating under, which is a credit application and a basic, very basic service level agreement. The second thing you'd want to give them is your W-9. You'd have to have a W-9 because in order for them to set you up as a vendor in their system, they need to know your tax ID number, your legal company name, address, things of that nature for billing and for compliance when it comes to accounting purposes. And then from there, that's really all you need at a minimum level. All right. Now you can add all kinds of other stuff in there and you can bloat it and create it. You can put a 40-page contract in there if you want. But the reality is if you're just getting started with shippers and you're going to do a trial load with a shipper, you don't need to have some, very legal, crazy shipper carrier packet or shipper broker packet. Okay. You can start very minimalistic. Matter of fact, the fact is that particularly for the first several years, very few of our shippers ever had a shipper broker agreement. Unless it was a shipper broker agreement that came from the shipper themselves. But they weren't signing our shipper broker agreement. We had a basic credit app that had some basic terms and they agreed to those terms. We just wanted to make sure we were getting paid. That's all we really wanted to make sure is that somebody agreed to pay us in 30 days from when they got the invoice, right? That's the most important part, right? And that they understood that we were a broker, not a carrier, and that we weren't accepting liability as a carrier. We were simply a broker. So that's a basic starting point, but I would recommend, because here's what's going to happen. If you do get somebody that says, oh, that sounds good, Avery, why don't you send me over your packet? And you don't have one, now you're going to have to scramble to put it together. But I wouldn't fear it. It's not something that's crazy. Matter of fact, if you go into my YouTube channel, and you search for shipper broker packet, you'll see an entire training I did on it. And I walk through the process for you. So that might help you. What TMS do you recommend? I have a close friend who owns one of the most successful TMS companies in the country. And it's the one I recommend to all my students. It's called Ascend. And if you go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/TMS, you can sign up for a free trial with no credit card. All you have to do is in the coupon code, let them know that you're from my community by putting in FBBC. That's it. So you go to that link, you sign up for a free trial. You don't have to put your credit card in. You can test drive the whole program. All you got to do in order to make sure you can sign up with no credit card and to get access to that is just make sure in the coupon code you put FBBC. That's it. Now, there are now hundreds of TMS programs out there. There are ones that are brand new and there are ones that are 20 plus years old, right? When I first started in brokerage, TMSs are not what they are today. Here's why I like Ascend and the recommendation I'm giving you now. Because they've been around for, I think it's definitely well over a decade. It's probably going on 20 years. The owner, Tim Hyam, was a broker before he sold his brokerage and then started the TMS business. I think they have more brokers using their software than any other TMS on the platform, on the market. I'm pretty sure that's the case. They're zero debt, right? They're not a company that's swimming in debt and then 3 months from now they're going to go out of business like a lot of these startups. And they're very technology forward, meaning they're always innovating and adding new features to try to make your job easier. So that's my pitch. If you guys want to sign up for a free trial, it costs you nothing. Go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/TMS and you guys can check it out. Just make sure in the coupon code you put FBBC. Otherwise, you're not going to get the bonuses they offer. Otherwise, I'm not sure if they're going to require a credit card or whatever. But if you put that FBBC in, there won't be any credit card. Hope that helps. I guess I bit off more than I could chew here today. I've got a lot more questions than I thought. I'm scrolling. Give me 1 minute. Luke asks, Dennis, what are you seeing in the Midwest outbound flatbed right now? It's tightening up even at $5 to $6 a mile. It's still tough to lock trucks. do you think capacity will free up once spring construction gets rolling? You know, Luke, if I had a crystal ball, I would be happy to share a definitive answer with you. But I'm not on the ground moving loads like I used to. All right. I sold my brokerage back in 2016 and focused on coaching and training and helping other people replicate what I've done. And we've been very fortunate. We've got a lot of people that have built 6 and 7 and even 8-figure businesses, but I'm not in the load boards every day looking at pricing because I'm not doing quotes. Okay. So I know that based upon my students and people I trust in the industry, I know that there are specific regions, specific lanes where capacity, there's a lot more, there's not enough capacity right now. There's less trucks than there are loads, and that's driving price up. So the pros and cons of that are rates are up, but it's hard to find trucks. So I get the dilemma. I get the challenge. Matter of fact, I even asked a question on LinkedIn recently. I said, would you rather have a tight market where trucks, where rates go up, but trucks are hard to find? Or would you rather have a loose market where rates go down and trucks are easy to find? And ultimately, I think it was probably split about 60 to 70 wanted the rates going up in a tight market versus about 30% wanting it in a loose market. So, you know, I'm not sure what's going to happen in the spring based upon any specific dynamic, but here's the cool part, right? Finding trucks is a function of rates. Here's the best part about what's going on right now. How do I explain this to you? Oh, here it is. It's very simple, right? Complexity creates opportunity. Volatility creates opportunity. I would much prefer to be in a market that has volatility where rates are going up or rates are going down, right? Than a stable market. The reason being is because volatility creates opportunities within shippers because the incumbents, maybe carriers that they've relied on or brokers that they've relied on, are now giving loads back. Tender rejections are coming in. And so now they're being forced to look other places to service their freight. So they're more likely to bring on new providers based upon that dynamic. Again, remember this: volatility creates opportunity and complexity creates opportunity. What I mean, a one pick, one drop van load is a lot less complex than than an expedited load going on the same type of truck, a van, right? Or on a 4-stop load or a 3-pick 1-stop load. Or when you have complexity, it creates opportunity and margin, and so does volatility. So I don't have a crystal ball. I just wanted to add a little bit of color and context to the underlying dynamics that are driving the question, but I totally understand. And that some markets are up, some especially in the Midwest. So I'm going to cross my fingers for you, buddy, that it opens up a little bit. But remember, as trucks become more available, rates are going to go down. Okay, that's how it works. When trucks are tight, rates go up. When trucks are loose, right? When trucks are tight, rates go up. When trucks are loose, rates go down. Hope that helps. Okay, so Dave clarified the question. Okay, so you need 8 shippers to raise their hand to make them after complete the onboard process. Okay. So you have a brokerage that's telling you they'll become an agent if you have 8 clients. Okay, so they're telling you to go out and work and get 8 clients before you're even a part of their organization. I'm going to be honest with you. I wouldn't waste my time. I don't know who the brokerage is, but they either want to work with you or they don't. Find a brokerage that's willing to work with you and know that in the early stages, you need some support, but it's very little cost and risk to them. Now, your employer, you may not even like this suggestion, but you asked, so I'm going to answer it. If you're going to try to onboard 8 clients before you actually have a company to work with, before you have any support, before you have any resources, before you have an onboarding process, before you have a shipper broker packet, before you have any of that, how are they expecting you to do that if you're set up to fail? My suggestion is find a company that's willing to work with you, even though you don't have existing clients, knowing that you're going to go out there and bust your ass on straight commission and get paid 50 to 70%, and that you don't eat if you don't produce. But the fact is they have almost zero risk to bring you on as an agent. What do they got to do? Do a little bit of onboarding, a little bit of training on how to use their TMS, and then that's it. There's not that much to onboard a new agent. Just my 2 cents. You may not like it, but it is what it is. Where do you advertise to get agents to work for me? I would say don't go and pay for advertising. There's Jobs and Logistics, there's Indeed.com, there's Monster, there's these different job boards. You can go there and place a job ad, but you're not going to get very good people. Okay. My biggest suggestion to you is there's 2. One is use the load boards, because there are already brokers and agents on there. And if you use the load board as a prospecting tool to find agents and brokers, it won't be that hard, because there's tons of them all over the place, and their phone numbers are there, their emails are there, everything's there. Okay. So that's one place. The other place is LinkedIn. My favorite place to do any sort of recruiting or selling by having people come to me, right? Inbound is LinkedIn, right? So if you go to LinkedIn, you build a network, you start some conversation, you start posting content, you're engaging in other people's content, you're messaging back and forth, you're commenting on different posts. You're actually doing what they call social selling, right? At that point, you're also going to see other brokerages that are also recruiting on there and what they're doing. So you're going to be able to kind of work from there. So I think LinkedIn and the load boards are probably your 2 best sources. If you just want to advertise, then go to Jobs and Logistics, Indeed, or maybe Monster. There might be some other job boards out there too, but they're going to be paid job boards. But I don't think you're going to get the quality that you're looking for. Okay, let's see. So we got Freight Steward. I'm a freight agent, and it's a great supplement for my full-time job while I ramp up my book of business, doing $250K annual revenue with 2 clients. Congratulations. That's awesome. I don't know if you went through my Freight Broker Bootcamp program or you went through my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator program, but kudos to you. Good job. You're doing this part-time while you're in your career, and you were able to establish a couple of clients and service those clients as a way to kind of give you a parachute out of your full-time job. So, I'm not sure how much additional you have to start doing, or monthly profit, or whatever you have to do to try to make that final jump. But kudos to you for going the extra mile. Okay, Raquel says, I wanted to get bonded, but they declined me because I had bad credit. So how could I get bonded? Well, here's the thing. You can probably get bonded, but it's going to be a really expensive proposition. Maybe your bond cost is going to be $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 a year if you have bad credit. Now, there is credit that they'll never underwrite. So I don't know what your credit is personally, but some companies will underwrite your credit. Okay, even if you have bad credit, they're going to charge you more because you're a higher risk. But you can get a bond if you have bad credit. My suggestion to you, Raquel, rather than beating your head against the wall and trying to, overpay for a broker bond that'll allow you to get your freight broker license, just start as a freight agent. You don't need a bond. You don't need a license. You don't need, to understand. You don't need to, worry about setting up the TMS, and you don't have to worry about the IT, and you don't have to worry about the marketing. You don't have to worry about any of that, because the brokerage that you as an agent would work under a freight brokerage, a licensed freight brokerage. You would be an independent 1099 contractor, which means your own business owner, right? They can't tell you what hours you're going to work. They can't tell you exactly what to do. You're going to do it in a revenue share where you're going to get 50 to 70% of the profit. And there's little to no startup cost. And you can save that money to build your credit, right? And to pay off bad debt that you have or whatever's killing your credit. And then eventually Once you build a small book of business, if you want to transition to your own brokerage at that point, now you've got better credit, you've got some cash flow, you've got some customers, and you're on your way. Now, you may choose to stay as an agent because it's one of the best gigs in town. You have little to no risk, and you've got a huge upside. I have clients and friends of mine that make over $1 million a year as an agent with very few employees, 2, 3, 5 employees max. And they're putting $1 million a year in their pocket. Now, they're the top 5% of all brokers. I'm not saying that's going to happen for you. I'm not promising you anything, but the opportunity is there as an agent to make a high 6-figure, 7-figure income without all the risk. I know that there's some advantages to being a licensed broker, right? I get that. But if you have bad credit or you don't have the financial resources right now, start as a freight agent. Okay? I hope that helps. I can give you, let me see, maybe I can give you a link to go to this company. Let's see. I can give you a link. Let me see. Hold on. If you're looking for a bonding company that's really good, I don't know if they'll approve you or not. Here, go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/bond. That's a partner company of ours. If you fill that form out, right, they will get back to you, set up a call to discuss. Now, they may or may not be able to help you, but if you're looking for a bond and you have bad credit or good credit, or you're looking to switch your bond and reduce your cost, this is a company that I've had hundreds of my students have used to get their bond, right? And so ultimately, they'll take care of you. I promise they will take care of you. They're one of the largest broker bond companies in the country, okay? They've got a great reputation. I wouldn't recommend them if they didn't. So go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/bond. But I will tell you, I think that where you're at right now, the price of the bond probably isn't going to be worth it. Start as an agent, start getting some customers, build your book, build your cash flow, and then you can always migrate later over into your own brokerage if you choose. Just my 2 cents. Yeah, Dave, screw Landstar. Get rid of them. Go find a brokerage. Go find a small to medium-sized company. Work for them, and you won't have to go jump through all these hoops. It's garbage. It's total garbage. Okay? Hey, listen, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today. If you found any value, if you got one nugget from this live, do me a huge favor. Hit the like button no matter where you're at. If you're on LinkedIn, if you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, wherever you're at. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you get notified whenever I go live or whenever new videos come out. Appreciate you guys being here. Again, if you're curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent, you can check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. That's the program that I put together for startups, people that are just getting started and are brand new to the industry. If you're looking specifically for sales help, if you're already maybe just getting started as a broker, but you're already through that basic setup phase and you're looking for startup, if you're looking for sales help, how to get shippers, how to get your first 5 or 10 shippers quick and hit your first 7 figures in the first 12 to 18 months, I have a program called my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator Program. You can check it out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com/waitlist. In order for you to get notified, it's closed right now. You can't even enroll. But if you get on the wait list, you're going to get notified when spots open up. And spots are going to open up soon. I know I've been saying this for the last couple of months, and I apologize. I just have been so much on my plate. I haven't been able to open enrollment. I'm going to be opening enrollment soon. I just sent out a text to everybody on my wait list and let them know if you want to get on the wait list. That's where I take that piece of my brain, everything that helped me to do over $200 million as a freight broker as it relates to sales and getting shippers, and I put it into a 8-week coaching and mentoring program. So you can get on the wait list for that. Check out all the details there. Thank you guys for being here. Have an awesome day. Have an awesome week. Set a reminder on your phone for next Monday at noon Eastern, and I'll be back to do another Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. In the meantime, have a great week, and we'll see you soon.